piercing cries of a Zoralan child named Kael reverberated through the vast emptiness of space as his small, bloodied fingers desperately clawed at the unresponsive communication panel. His ship had been brutally assaulted by the merciless Kowax Raiders just hours earlier, leaving him utterly alone, stranded, and facing a slow, agonizing demise. Despite his pleas for help, echoed by the frozen corpses of his family floating behind him, the Galactic Community remained indifferent. Among the indifferent, the wise Elvens muttered about the dangers of the Codex, advocating non-interference. The logical Quarians, typically objective and cold, calculated that the life of one small alien child was not worth risking a larger conflict. Then, a gruff human voice crackled through the comms. "This is Captain Jonas Steele of the Earthship Dauntless. We hear you, kid. We're on our way. Just hang tight." The Alien Council warned the Dauntless that attempting a rescue would be suicidal, as the Croaks were too ruthless and powerful. Captain Jonas, unmoved, declared, "To hell with you. I don't abandon children to die alone in space. Not now, not ever." His crew, Sarah, Finn, and Declan, shared his resolve. They knew it might be a one-way trip, but they were human, and they would not leave a child to suffer. The Dauntless streaked toward the outer rim, facing whatever horrors awaited them there, without backup or second chances. Just four humans, their wits, and their indomitable will to make a difference, regardless of the cost. As they approached, the Dauntless was met with a barrage of plasma fire, its shields faltering. Jonas demanded a damage report, learning that their forward cannons were destroyed, and their shields were at 60% and falling. The Croak warship, twice the size of the Dauntless, bristled with firepower. Finn skillfully maneuvered to keep them out of sight, but the odds seemed insurmountable. Jonas turned to Sarah, their tactical officer, who identified a vulnerability in the Croak ship's aft section. Jonas ordered Declan to divert all power to engines and after shields. With Finn pushing the engines to their limits, they managed a daring maneuver, bringing them behind the Croak ship. Jonas commanded, "Fire everything we've got." The Dauntless unleashed a full barrage, missiles and energy beams striking the unprotected aft of the Croak ship. Explosions reverberated across the Croak ship's hull as their engines took a hit, reported Sarah. "Weapons offline," she added. Jonas allowed himself a brief grin. "Good work, everyone. Now let's get that kid." Approaching the battered alien ship, Jonas stood with Sarah and Declan, while Finn kept the engine running for a quick exit. Racing to the airlock with weapons drawn, they boarded the vessel, navigating through debris and floating corpses. "Kael," Jonas called out, "we're here to help. Where are you?" A soft whimper drew their attention to a small hidden compartment. Opening it, Jonas found Kael shaking with fear. "It's okay," Jonas reassured softly. "We're getting you out of here." Kael hesitated for a moment before grasping Jonas's hand tightly. Just then, Finn's urgent voice came over the comms. "Captain, the Croak ship is powering up again. We need to leave now." Jonas scooped up Kael and ran, with Sarah and Declan close behind. They barely made it back to the Dauntless before the Croak ship opened fire, grazing their hull as Finn punched the engines, sending them hurtling away at breakneck speed. The Dauntless shuddered as it limped away from the Croak warship, its hull scorched and battered. Inside, emergency lights flickered, and sparks burst from damaged consoles. Jonas pushed himself up from the captain's chair, wincing from the bruises forming. "Damage report," he called out, his voice hoarse. Declan emerged from the smoky haze, reporting grimly, "It's bad, Captain. Engines are barely holding together. Life support is on the fritz, and we're fresh out of ammo." Jonas nodded grimly. They had thrown everything they had at the Croak ship and nearly been torn apart, but they had saved the kid. Speaking of which, Jonas made his way to Kael, who looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Jonas knelt down beside him. "Hey there, Kael. You're safe now. We're going to get you home." Kael's lower lip trembled. You came for me, even though the Croak was so scary and strong?" Jonas smiled softly. "Because leaving a child to die alone is never an option for us humans." Tears welled up in Kael's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much." Jonas patted his shoulder, then turned to his crew. "All right, people. We need to let the council know what happened here. Sarah, get me a line to those bureaucrats." Sarah tapped at her console, but shook her head. "Comms are spotty, Captain. That last hit really did a number on us." Jonas sighed. "Just do your best." After a few moments, A flickering hologram of the council chambers appeared. The Alanian and Quarian representatives looked at Jonas with a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Captain Steele," the Alanian said coldly, "we warned you not to interfere with the Codex. Your reckless actions could have dire consequences for the entire galaxy." Jonas felt his temper flare. "With all due respect, Counselor, I wasn't about to let a child die out there. We did what was right." The Quarians shook their head. "What you did was foolish. The Croaks will not take this insult lightly. They will seek retribution." Jonas retorted, "Then send us some backup. We're dead in the water here, and the kid needs medical attention." Jonas snapped. The counselors exchanged a look. "We cannot risk further provoking the Croaks," the Alanian said. "You are on your own, Captain." With that, the hologram winked out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Jonas slammed his fist against the wall. "Cowards," he growled. "They'd rather let us die than stand up to those raiders." Jack spun around in his pilot's chair. "So what do we do now, Cap? We can't exactly limp back to Earth like this." Jonas took a deep breath, then squared his shoulders. "We find another way. We'll get Kael to safety, even if we have to do it alone. Finn, plot a course through the uncharted territories. It's risky, but it's our best bet to avoid Croak space." Finn grinned. "Aye aye, Captain. One dangerous uncharted route coming right up. Declan, I need you to work your magic on those engines. Squeeze every last bit of power out of them," Jonas ordered. Declan cracked his knuckles. "I'll keep us flying, even if I have to get out and push." As the crew set to work, Jonas turned back to Kael. "Looks like we're in for a bit of a rough ride. But don't worry. We'll get you home safe." Kael managed a small smile. "I believe you. You humans are brave, not like the other aliens." Jonas sat down next to him. "Tell me about your people, Kael. What are the Zoralan like?" As the Dauntless limped through the stars, Jonas listened intently to Kael's stories. He learned of a gentle, intelligent race with incredible medical knowledge. Kael spoke of how his people had developed cures for diseases that plagued other worlds, freely sharing their wisdom. "You know," Jonas said thoughtfully, "your people's skills could do a lot of good in the galaxy. Have you ever thought about reaching out to other races?" Kael's antennae perked up. "We've always been too afraid, but maybe it's time to be brave like you humans." Jonas grinned. In the face of everything, this kid was already thinking about how to make the universe better. Maybe there was hope for the future after all. The Dauntless shuddered as it navigated through the treacherous, uncharted territories. Jonas gripped the armrests of his captain's chair, his knuckles turning white as Finn wove the ship through a dense asteroid field. "Hold steady, Finn," Jonas called out, his voice tense but confident. "You're doing great." Finn's brow furrowed in concentration, his hands flying over the controls. "Aye aye, Captain, but these asteroids are the least of our worries." Suddenly, as if by some preordained cue, a brilliant flash of light illuminated the bridge, followed by a deafening boom. The ship lurched violently, throwing the crew against their restraints. "Ion storm," Sarah shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "Shields are holding, but barely." Jonas leaned forward, his eyes scanning the view screen. "Declan, can we reroute power to the shields?" Declan's voice crackled over the comm, strained but determined. "I'm on it, Captain, but I'm running out of tricks down here." Another jolt rocked the ship as a hostile alien vessel emerged from the storm, its weapons blazing. Jonas recognized the design, a Zorgo Raider, known for their ruthless attacks on vulnerable ships. "Evade maneuvers. Finn." Jonas barked. "Sarah, target their weapons systems." The crew worked seamlessly, their movements precise and coordinated. Finn sent the Dauntless into a dizzying spin, narrowly avoiding the Raiders' fire, while Sarah launched a surgical strike that disabled the enemy's cannons. As the Raider limped away, Jonas let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Good work, everyone, but stay alert. We're not out of this yet." Kael watched the humans with a mix of awe and concern. "Is it always like this for you?" he asked quietly. Jonas turned to him, his expression softening. "Not always, but we knew the risks when we chose to help you, and we'd do it again in a heartbeat." Kael's eyes widened. "But why? Why risk so much for a stranger?" Jonas said firmly, "Because it's the right thing to do. Because every life matters, no matter how small or different." As they pressed on through the dangerous expanse, news of their actions began to spread on distant worlds. Beings of all kinds huddled around communication screens, watching the story unfold. Some saw the humans' bravery as a beacon of hope, while others viewed it as foolishness. Meanwhile, in the shadowy halls of a Croak stronghold, Commander Z seethed with rage. "They dare to defy us," he growled. "Hunt them down. Bring me their heads, and make sure the galaxy sees what happens to those who cross us." Back on the Dauntless, Declan burst onto the bridge, his face etched with worry. "Captain, we have a problem. I've detected a hidden signal piggybacking on our comms, the Croak. They've been tracking us." Jonas's jaw clenched. "How long?" "Long enough," Declan said grimly. "They're closing in fast." Sarah checked her scanners, her eyes widening. "He's right. A Croak warship is headed straight for us. They'll be on top of us in minutes." Jonas stood, his resolve hardening. "Then we make our stand here. Finn, scan the area for any advantages we can use." Finn's fingers danced across his console. "There's a nebula nearby, Captain. Dense gases, highly volatile. If we could lure them in, we could use the nebula against them." Jonas nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "Declan, how much can you coax out of the engines? We need to stay ahead of them long enough to reach the nebula." Declan cracked his knuckles. "I'll give you everything she's got, Captain, and then some." Kael stepped forward, his small form radiating determination. "I can help too. I know Croak technology. I might be able to disrupt their systems, give us an edge." Jonas looked at him, proud and concerned in equal measure. "It'll be dangerous, Kael. Are you sure?" Kael nodded, his eyes shining with courage. "You risked everything for me. It's my turn to be brave." As the Croak ship loomed ever closer, the Dauntless sped towards the swirling nebula. The humans and their young alien friend united in their desperate gamble. They had come this far. They would not fail now, not when so much depended on them. The Dauntless shook violently as it plunged into the nebula, the colorful gases swirling around the hull. On the bridge, the crew held on tight, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow. "Croak ship entering the nebula," Sarah reported, her voice tense. "They're right behind us." Jonas leaned forward in his chair. "Steady as she goes, Finn. Declan, convert all power to the shields. We're going to need every bit of protection we can get." The ship groaned as Declan worked his magic in engineering, coaxing every last ounce of energy into the shimmering force fields that enveloped the Dauntless. Kael hunched over a console beside Sarah, his small fingers flying over the controls. "I'm in their systems," he said, his voice tight with concentration, trying to disrupt their sensors. On the view screen, the Croak ship loomed out of the swirling gases, its weapons glowing ominously. "They're locking on." Finn shouted. "Brace for impact." The Dauntless shuddered as the Croak opened fire, their energy beams slicing through the nebula. But Kael's efforts had not been in vain. The shots went wide, missing the Dauntless by mere meters. "Good work, Kael," Jonas called out. "Keep them off balance. Finn, bring us about." Sarah, target their engines. "Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine." The Dauntless swung around, facing the Croaks head-on. Sarah's fingers danced over her console, and a barrage of missiles streaked towards the enemy ship. But the Croaks were not so easily defeated. Their superior technology allowed them to evade the worst of the human assault. "Their shields are holding," Sarah said grimly. "We need a new plan." Jonas stared at the view screen, his mind racing. Then it hit him. "The nebula," he said, his voice rising with excitement. "Declan, can you rig a plasma charge? Something we can detonate remotely?" Declan's eyes widened, a grin spreading across his face. "Aye, Captain. I think I see where you're going with this. Finn, I need you to fly straight at them as close as you can get. Keep firing, keep their attention on us," Jonas ordered. The crew nodded, their faces set with determination. They knew the plan was risky, but they trusted their captain. Kael looked up at Jonas, his eyes wide. "What can I do?" Jonas placed a hand on the young alien's shoulder. "Keep disrupting their systems, Kael. Every second counts." Meanwhile, Declan worked frantically in engineering, jury-rigging a plasma charge. The Dauntless hurtled towards the Croak ship, weapons blazing. The Croak returned fire, their shots growing ever closer as Kael's interference began to falter. "Declan, tell me you have that charge ready," Jonas called over the comms. "Ready and waiting, Captain," Declan replied, his voice strained. "But you'll only have one shot at this." "Finn, on my mark. Pull up hard," Jonas ordered. "Sarah, fire the charge directly into their path." The crew tensed, ready to execute the desperate maneuver. The Croak ship loomed ahead, filling the view screen. "Steady," Jonas said, his voice calm. "Steady." The Dauntless shook as the Croak landed a glancing blow, alarms blaring across the bridge. "Now!" Jonas roared. Finn yanked back on the controls, sending the Dauntless into a steep climb. At the same moment, Sarah launched the plasma charge, the glowing orb arcing through the nebula. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Then, the charge detonated directly in front of the Croak ship, igniting the volatile nebula gases. A massive explosion ripped through the void, engulfing the Croak in a maelstrom of fire and plasma. The Dauntless shook and bucked as the shockwave hit, throwing the crew against their restraints. But when the flames cleared, the Croak ship was nowhere to be seen, reduced to shattered debris by the cataclysmic blast. A cheer went up on the bridge, the humans embracing each other in relief and triumph. Kael stared at the view screen, his eyes wide with wonder. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." Jonas grinned, the weight of the past hours finally lifting from his shoulders. "We did it, Kael. Together." As the Dauntless emerged from the nebula, battered but unbroken, Jonas knew that their fight was far from over. The Croaks would not forget this defeat, and the galaxy was still a dangerous place. But for now they had won. They had shown that courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome even the greatest of odds. And as long as they had each other, Jonas knew there was nothing they couldn't face. The Dauntless shook violently as it plunged deeper into the heart of the raging nebula. The view screen was a kaleidoscope of swirling colors, the gases painting an almost mesmerizing picture, if not for the deadly Croak ship hot on their tail. "They're gaining on us," Sarah shouted over the blaring alarms, her fingers dancing across the weapons console, sending volleys of laser fire back at their pursuers. Jonas gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. "Finn, I need you to keep us one step ahead. Use the nebula to your advantage." "Aye, Captain," Finn called back, his brow furrowed in concentration as he wove the ship through the treacherous gases. The Croak ship loomed ever closer, its weapons pounding against the Dauntless' weakening shields. On the bridge, sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. "Shields at 20%, Declan reported, his voice strained. "I'm rerouting every scrap of power I can, but it won't hold for long." Jonas turned to Kael, who was hunched over a console, his small hands a blur of motion. "Kael, tell me you have something," Jonas urged. The young Zoralan looked up, his eyes wide but determined. "I think I can disrupt their targeting systems, but I'll need to get closer," Kael replied. Jonas nodded grimly. "Do it. Finn, bring us in range. Sarah, give them everything we've got." The Dauntless surged forward, Finn steering them in a daring arc towards the Kowax ship. Sarah unleashed a barrage of missiles, the projectiles streaking through the nebula like angry hornets. The Croak ship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering. Seizing his chance, Kael input a series of rapid commands. "Got it. Their targeting is scrambled," he reported. "Good work, Kael," Jonas praised. Meanwhile, Declan, now in engineering, grinned as he activated the traps he'd laid, a series of jury-rigged MP mines floating in the nebula. As the Croak ship blundered into them, the mines detonated, bathing the enemy vessel in cascades of disruptive energy. The Croak ship listed, its systems haywire. Jonas saw his chance. "Finn, bring us in close. I'm going aboard." "That's suicide, Captain," Sarah protested. Jonas met her gaze, his eyes hard. "It's the only way to end this. Keep them busy. I'll deal with Vexer." He raced to the airlock, a pulse rifle in his hands and determination in his heart. Alarms blared, and emergency lights painted the corridors an ominous red. Croak warriors, their reptilian faces contorted with rage, charged at him. Jonas met them head-on, his rifle spitting plasma as he fought his way through the ship. Every step was a battle, every corner a potential ambush, but he wouldn't be deterred. Bursting onto the bridge, he confronted Vexer, the Croak commander. "You dare to challenge me, human?" Vexer hissed. Jonas stared him down. "I dare to stand up for what's right." They clashed in a furious melee, blows exchanged, blood spilled. But Jonas would not yield. In a final, desperate move, Jonas feinted left then lunged right, catching Vexer off guard. His rifle but connected with the Croak's skull with a sickening crunch. Vexer crumpled, defeated. Jonas stood over him, panting but victorious. "It's over," he said into his comms. Vexor is down. The Croaks are finished. Cheers erupted over the link, his crew's relief and triumph palpable. Get back here, Captain, Lara said, her voice thick with emotion. Let's go home. Jonas made his way back to the Dauntless, leaving the crippled Croak ship behind. As they emerged from the nebula battered but unbroken, Jonas allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. But what he saw next made his jaw drop. Arrayed before them was a vast fleet of ships Zoralan, Larian, Varen, and a dozen other races. Captain Jonas Steele, a familiar voice crackled over the comms. It was the Alanian counselor, but gone was the condescension from before. The galaxy owes you and your crew a great debt. Your actions have shown us the importance of unity and compassion. Jonas felt a lump in his throat. He looked around at his crew, at Kael, and saw the same emotion reflected in their eyes. We did it together, he said. As Kael was reunited with his people, tears of joy streaming down his face, Jonas knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had played a part in shaping its future. They had shown that courage, determination, and the unbreakable human spirit could overcome any obstacle. And that legacy, Jonas knew, would endure long after they were gone.